Have you ever asked yourself what it really means to be a man? Not what you were told, not what school taught, not what social media shouts at you every day, but what it actually means deep down when you're alone with yourself. Is it strength, silence, action, control, or is it something else entirely? Why is it that when you lead, you're labeled aggressive? When you cry, you're called weak. And when you try to figure it all out, you're told to just get over it. What if it was once sacred to understand what we lost and what it meant before we even had words for it? We need to go back. Not to the internet, not to the 1950s, but much further, back to the oldest stories humans ever told. Back to a man who sat in silence while the world burned around him. In ancient Indian philosophy, there's a symbolic figure named Shiva. He wasn't a king or a warrior in the way we often imagine. He didn't fight battles or give speeches. He sat, cross-legged, alone, in meditation, not to escape the world, but to master himself. He's often seen as a god of destruction, but it's not destruction through violence. It's destruction of ego, illusion, and false identity. Shiva represents what's called the divine masculine, not a man who controls others, but a man who controls himself. And this wasn't unique to Hinduism. Across cultures, in Zen tradition, Stoic thought, indigenous teachings, the masculine ideal was once calm, structured, and spiritually aligned. This was masculinity when it was still sacred. It wasn't about dominance, it was about direction. But this ideal didn't survive untouched. Because eventually, the world changed. One of the oldest spiritual texts in the world tells the story of Arjuna, a warrior standing at the edge of battle. He sees friends, teachers, and family members on the other side of the battlefield. And in that moment, he breaks down. He drops his weapon. He trembles. He questions everything. And for the first time, the warrior becomes fully human. What follows is a conversation with his spiritual guide, Krishna, about duty, purpose, and clarity. He's told, "You don't fight because you want to. You fight because it is your dharma, your sacred path." This moment became central to Indian philosophy and to sacred masculinity because it taught that emotion wasn't weakness. That hesitation could be part of purpose, and that a man could be both sensitive and strong, if his strength came from awareness and not aggression. But that vision didn't survive contact with modernity. During the colonial era, many ancient cultures, including India's, were reshaped. The British Empire didn't just take resources. It replaced spiritual values with mechanical ones. The colonizers' version of manhood was cold, industrial, and linear. Men were expected to be workers, soldiers, systems of production. Stillness became laziness. Spirituality became superstition. Presence became weakness. The masculine ideal was no longer the man who reflected, meditated, or guided. It was the man who performed, obeyed, and produced. And that shift didn't stay in the West. It spread globally, through education, religion, and social norms. Boys were no longer raised with myths of warriors, sages, philosophers, or kings. They were told to man up, to suppress, and to survive. Sacred masculinity was replaced with utility. And when utility fails, there's nothing left to hold on to. Today, masculinity is in crisis. We have two extremes. One side claims masculinity is toxic and outdated. The other clings to a version rooted in dominance, control, and bravado. Neither one offers depth. Both are rooted in fear, and between them is a generation of men quietly suffering. They don't want to dominate, but they don't want to disappear. They don't want to collapse, but they want to feel. They don't want to be passive, but they don't want to harm. So they perform, or they shut down, or they drift, caught between instinct and shame. Not because they're broken, but because no one showed them what sacred masculinity looked like. We told them masculinity was the problem, but we never taught them how to carry it properly. Think about every man you truly respected. Not for his wealth or charm, but for his presence. He probably wasn't the loudest, or the most aggressive. He was grounded, still, clear. He made people feel safe. He didn't chase control. He carried responsibility. That's sacred masculinity. And when we lose it, everything else begins to collapse. Relationships become unstable. Purpose fades. Boys grow up without men they trust. But sacred masculinity isn't gone. It's waiting. Waiting to be remembered, reclaimed, rebuilt. Not as something new, but something ancient. You don't have to invent a new version of what it means to be a man. You just have to remember. Remember the stillness, the strength without noise, the courage without cruelty, the clarity without chaos. You don't need to become something louder. You need to become something deeper. Because the sacred isn't gone. It's just waiting for you to return.